Hello, Health Psych students. This is part 5 of the intro lecture, starting with the fourth therapeutic lifestyle change from the Walsh article. So let's go and do it. All right, we just finished nature, and now we're going to talk about the fourth therapeutic lifestyle change, TLC, relationships. And let's step back and kind of talk about the importance of human relationships here. We know in the psychotherapy relationship that 1/3 of the outcome is what is called the therapeutic alliance. And the therapeutic alliance is if client or patient feels that they are able to be close with their therapist, be able to disclose their emotional experiences, be honest, feel like they can share without being punished or harmed or shamed or any of that type of thing. And meaning that a good part of even a therapy relationship is the actual alliance between the two individuals. Now, it's a special relationship because you've got a professional and you've got an individual who is being served in some way. One way of thinking, this is a bit more psychodynamic, so a little bit older than more modern, but the therapist and the client, as they build a relationship and as they hit hiccups, which are called ruptures in the field, and then they're able to repair those hiccups, repair those ruptures, that a lot of times the dynamic that gets worked out in therapy ideally generalizes to the client's other relationships in life and is able to help them improve their relationships in other areas of life. And that's kind of the cornerstone of what we call interpersonal therapy, IPT. Okay, I do want to back up and I want to take a little bit of look at our culture. I haven't read this book, I've read about it, but it's called Bowling Alone. And it's a little bit of a commentary on modern society and how modern society differs from older society. So, older society, just to give you an example, back when I was a kid, my parents belonged to a bowling league. And it was a thing. I remember we went every whatever weeknight it was as a kid, I don't know. And they would bowl with their friends and they had matching outfits and they had their bowling bag and their bowling ball. And I believe there was beer involved and lots of frivolity. And they would just have this community that they would meet up with once a week. I can't think about how long it has been since I have bowled necessarily, but the gist of this book is that in modern day society, and there's a lot of good reasons for this, there's just a lot of people who are socially isolated. People are spending less time with their family and friends. They're spending less time involved in intimate emotional conversation with their friends and their confidants, and then less time in civic groups like serving their communities, or organizations like religious organizations or social organizations like a bowling league. Now, one of the things that I do think has been happening, I want to take a look at this next slide. Now I'm going to go back, is social media. And I want you all to reflect on this, and I'm sure you have talked about this a little bit with family and friends. Is modern day social media, is Facebook and Instagram and Snapchat and the other things that individuals are using, is it bringing people closer together, or is it serving as a substitute for true intimate relationships? And as an example, I know there are individuals on social media who troll and seem like they're just there to pick fights with other people and kind of recognize other people's differences. There's that's happening in social media. We do know, and we've done some research in my lab on this because one of my lines of research is interpersonal violence. There does tend to be more anonymous bullying that is happening online, which can be very harmful for individuals. I don't know if anybody in here has been a victim of that. But there are just a lot of things that happen on social media that can be really unhealthy for individuals who are actually posting, as well as individuals who end up being victims of that. And so I kind of asked that question. I know it's a complicated question, but is it bringing us closer together or is it pushing us apart? TLC number 5 is recreation and enjoyable activities. I love the fact that they break the term down. Recreation comes from the term recreation. And I don't know if any of you've had this experience. I love being outdoors on the weekends when I can be. During the summer, by the time I get myself outdoors in the morning, I don't want to come back in and do anything else. So I have to be careful about when I exit the building. If you've ever had the experience where you get outside and maybe you go on a hike and maybe you have lunch with friends on the hike and you've just been outdoors and you've been getting physical activity and you come back and your to-do list is just as long as it was when you left, but you just feel differently about it. You've had a mini vacation. You feel like you have, recreated yourself, refueled. And so we know this is very important. And if you think about human evolution, in our evolution, we lived outside except for like cave experiences or TP experiences. And so there was just a lot of being outdoors in our lives. We know that people who are experiencing psychological distress, so psychopathology, so psychological disorders, have less reinforcement in their lives. So one of the things that we try to do is try to increase reinforcement. We know that recreation naturally increases reinforcement. And then a lot of times, just like the example I gave you a second ago, nature overlaps with social events, can overlap with exercise. So just a lot of good things going on there. Some other enjoyable activities that we know are very renewing for individuals. We know that humor in relationships can be very renewing if there's play and fun, whether it's between family members or romantic partners or even with pets. That thing can really renew. We know that the expressive arts and our clinical mental health counseling master's program, which is over in the College of Ed, it's different from psychology. They have a creative arts track. And they call it therapeutic arts, where they have dance and I believe they have visual arts and things like that. But there's certainly other things that are ways of creating, whether it be artwork or poetry or songwriting, or anything that can feel like it's just created. It's not necessarily something that has to be done, but it's enjoyable to do. Okay. Number 6, we're going to cover this a lot more in the stress and management lecture, but let's go over this a little bit here. TLC number 6, relaxation and stress management. Few people grow up, unless your parents taught you or in your school system they taught you, few people grow up and learn how to calm the nervous system down, particularly the sympathetic branch of the nervous system. We know also, put into evolutionary context, a lot of modern day stressors are very different from the stressors in our evolution, where if something was trying to eat us when we're roaming around the prairie and we get that fight or flight or freeze response, that was really adaptive in helping us flee and get away or fight off whatever it is that was threatening us. Nowadays, imagine you're sitting and you're taking a really complicated calculus test and your mind goes blank and your body gets that fight or flight response and you're mobilized for all this energy, but that's not what you need. What you need is your nervous system to be calm, and you need to be able to think straight, and you need to be able to remember. And so one of the reasons why people are experiencing so much stress nowadays is there's a mismatch between their evolutionary background and the way their body's wired. A lot of times individuals' responses to extreme stress are unskilled. They haven't learned the toolbox, like we like to call it in therapy. And then a lot of times they're, without meaning to do it this way, it's self-destructive. So somebody who gets anxious about studying for a test and starts drinking and then blacks out from their drinking and doesn't study from their test, yeah, the drinking probably felt relief, or it felt good short term, but long term, that's creating all kinds of other problems. And think about other self-destructive stuff that people do. Individuals who may, use their food in self-destructive ways, like purging. People who may take drugs to feel better, and then end up creating more problems in the long run. People who cut their bodies as a means of stress relief. So that's what I'm talking about, that kind of stuff when I talk about self-destructive. Some of the self-management skills, Walsh divides this stuff into the somatic and the psychological. And here he talks about some of the things that we know are really effective in calming down people's nervous systems, turning on the parasympathetic branch, turning off the sympathetic branch, self-hypnosis, guided imagery, progressive muscle relaxation. We know this is really effective in decreasing anxiety disorders. Then Walsh goes into what he calls the contemplative types of stress management, meditation, where you learn how to quiet your thoughts and feelings in your mind by deliberately focusing on something else. Yoga, we know the data on this stuff, it decreases problems with anxiety and insomnia. It's been shown to be helpful in eating disorders, depression, and then soothing emotions in people with borderline personality disorder. These types of relaxation techniques fit very well into modern psychotherapies. Dialectical behavioral therapy, which was originally developed by Marsha Linehan to help individuals with borderline personality disorder, has a lot of intensive coping strategies in DBT. Acceptance and commitment therapy adopts these also. Lots of use of mindfulness training, so like meditations to decrease anxiety and depression. We know research showing this can be really effective in relieving caregiver stress. We know this can be helpful in caregivers not only to decrease their own stress, but increase their empathy in serving the people that they are caretaking for, even though that might be a really stressful situation. Increasing sensitivity, increasing emotional stability, and just decreasing burnout. So lots and lots of nice effects in the scientific literature for this. TLC number 7 involves religious and spiritual involvement. And this is a place in the scientific field where we've got a really interesting bifurcation in what is helpful for the majority of individuals who have these beliefs. We know that religious involvement, if individuals are believe in a higher power like God, Allah, who is a loving, forgiving God, then that tends to really benefit mental health. However, if individuals have grown up in, let's say, a church or a synagogue that is more this idea of fire and brimstone God, that God's always watching you, and if you sin, you're going to be punished. In the worst case scenario, you're going to go to hell instead of go to heaven. That type of religious belief tends to have less of a healthy effect on mental health. And if there are particular crises or things that go wrong in that individual's life, and they believe that this bad stuff is happening because God is punishing them, even though they really had nothing to do with this bad thing, they're really not to blame for it, that can really be detrimental to mental health. We do know that people who attend religious services on a regular basis have a longer lifespan. And this is the one place in the psychological literature where having an external locus of control, this idea that somebody else outside of me, this higher power, is looking after me and loves me and cares about me and is sad when I am hurting, that is a really good place to have a external locus of control. External locus of control in other areas of life, like in your thinking about your ability to be a good parent or thinking about your ability to do well in school. An external locus of control there ends up being unhealthy for us. And that's where we need an internal locus of control. So if I did bad on an exam and I have an internal locus of control, I will attribute that to, well, I just didn't study enough. I really need to study more for my exam because I know I can do better, or I need to meet with my professor and find out what I missed on my exam so I can understand where I'm going wrong in my studying. That's an internal locus of control. And in all other areas of life, internal locus of control is associated with health, except for this religious spiritual belief. We know that a lot of modern day therapies have invited and incorporated these aspects into the therapy. Alcoholics Anonymous and NA have long adopted a 12-step program where individuals are meant to heal and get closer to God, as an example. DBT definitely accepts this acceptance and commitment therapy. And then a lot of these will incorporate this into, certainly religious and spiritual values fit into meaning in life. They fit into having a values-driven life, feeling like you know how you're supposed to treat other people and how you're supposed to behave in a kind and loving way. A lot of these will accept mindfulness and prayer and meditation within their therapies because this is a part of these religious experiences. And then just the social support that comes from having a sense of community, being able to go and be with other individuals and worship with them and have a shared value system and shared belief system. It's no wonder we have taken these sort of like, knowing about these religious and spiritual elements for so long in the evolution of humankind and incorporated them into modern day therapies that have scientific evidence. TLC number 8 is contribution and service. We know that people who are altruistic and serve others tend to have less greed or less jealous and less egocentric. A lot of professionals and volunteers who go into the helping professions and the healthcare professions, I've heard the term wounded healers, where they were wounded at some point in their background and either had help in healing or wish they had had help in healing, and end up, individuals who are very empathetic and caring and kind to other people and compassionate, wanting to go into a helping profession where they're serving others. We know that beside professions, people who volunteer tend to have healthier, longer lives. And the basics here is not only does it feel good to give to other people or give to animals or give to community in some way, it feels good for us to be able to do that. And so it's no wonder modern day therapies are getting people involved. And then also paying attention to if people are giving all the time and they're not able to take care of themselves or they're not getting in return, we know that that can certainly lead to feelings of obligation and burnout. So we got to be careful about that part, especially for these people, that these wounded healers or these sensitive souls. Okay, I want you to read this article and watch the Earthing movie. And so let's move on to, I have created my own number 9 TLC on earthing and grounding. And we know that so many modern day conditions are due to an underlying drive in inflammation in the body. Things like cardiovascular disease, diabetes, autoimmune, cancers, even Alzheimer's disease. And there's a really interesting trend in our human evolution. Excuse me, once upon a time, we used to walk the earth barefoot, or we would wear animal skins like moccasins to walk the earth. We would sleep on the ground on animal skins. And so during our walking around and during our sleep, we were touching the earth and receiving the earth's electrons very frequently throughout the day and throughout the night. Very interesting thing happened in the 1950s when sports shoes like Adidas and Nike had tremendous markets because they had developed these really cool shoes and they had these rubber soles and you could do athletics, and there were athletes who got sponsored to advertise for these companies. We saw a huge increase in the use of individuals having rubber-based soles in their shoes, and rubber is non-conductive. And so when you're walking around in rubber shoes, like most of us do, like I do most of the time, we are not getting the Earth's electrons from our walking around and touching the Earth. We know that by getting those electrons in the body, it relieves oxidative stress. It helps us remove O2 from the body. And we've got these free radicals that come from this oxidative stress in the body. I'm simplifying the chemistry. And those free radicals are seeking electrons to be able to effectively be removed from the body. And if they don't have those electrons, the body has excessive oxidative stress. And that oxidative stress and that inflammation are going to drive these conditions. I do want you to look at this graph a little bit. And it was just basically across the years how much there has been an increase when more people adopted those rubber-soled shoes and started walking around and not touching the earth with them. We saw a dramatic increase in a lot of the modern day diseases. The flip side of rubber is non-conducive conductive in terms of electricity, which is why wires are surrounded by rubber so that you could touch a wire that is an electrical wire on the outside on the rubber and not experience any kind of electrocution. The electrons are traveling inside the metal piece of the wire. We know that water is conducts electricity. That's why you got to get out of the pool. You got to get out of the lake when it's lightning, because if that lightning hits that water, you're going to fry. And we know that our bodies are primarily made of water. About 70% of us are water. And so there's all kinds of electrical conduction going on in the nervous system, as well as all throughout the body. You all learned that in intro psych, how the nerves are electronic and how they communicate across synapses and with neurotransmitter substances and electrical impulses. We know that getting exposed to earthing is going to create better ATP production and protein production in the body. The body is going to heal more when we have touched the earth. In this regard, it's giving the cells energy. It's going to speed up wound healing. Some really fascinating research where you take wounds in individuals and you expose them to touching the earth versus not, and how quickly the wounds heal when individuals have touched the earth. And so by grounding, we're going to be able to get those negatively charged electrons from the earth into the body, and that's a really healthy thing. And then I think I've made this point, the rubber is electrically resistant and is not going to allow those electrons to enter the body when we are wearing those shoes. Okay, so that one article, I want you to watch the earthing movie. Really fascinating data. I've already mentioned this a little bit between individuals. These would be scans where people are experiencing inflammation in the body, and then they earth for usually like 20 minutes, nothing like crazy. And then you see the dramatic change in the inflammation. We know that touching the ground increases blood flow and it decreases blood viscosity. There have been experimental trials of this and how quickly it helps heal wounds. People sleep better. I wear a earthing sheet when I sleep that plugs into the little mouth part of the electrical outlet, so it goes down and grounds. So my sheets are able to acquire some electrons, and I have slept better since I've been earthing. I don't sleep on an animal skin on the ground per se in a teepee, but there are other ways to do that in a more modern day bed that's lifted off the ground. People who earth on a regular basis report more daytime energy, less hormonal and menstrual effects. And then the cosmetic effects are people tend to have more blood flow to their skin and look healthier when they've been earthing on a regular basis. And so that's one of the cosmetic effects. Decreasing stress, we know this to be very clear. This would be an example of an earthing mat that you can buy and plug into a normal electrical outlet and earth with your feet. I've got one on my computer, so I've got it up on my table. So whenever I'm up here and I'm working throughout the day and I'm working on electronics, which can be unhealthy for us in the long run, I'm also getting earthed on my pad here. We know that earthing treats lots of different things. So we talked about sleep. It lowers blood pressure, so it can be used to treat hypertension, cardiovascular disease. It actually increases bone density. That's incorrect here. So increasing bone density. It is helpful in treating mood disorders, so treating anxiety, treating depression. It is healthy in relieving inflammation and autoimmune diseases. And it even has a positive effect on glucose, where people, if their glucose is too high in prediabetes or diabetes, it helps to bring glucose levels down. Basically, our bodies need those electrons, and most people are not getting those electrons. And so having some method, whether it's out walking barefoot and touching the ground, using a mat, using a sleeping mat to get those electrons, is going to do most individuals' health a lot of benefit. Okay. There's research where we've looked at normalizing cortisol levels, which is a stress hormone. There's research to suggest when you do EEG, it calms electrical activity in the brain. It reduces muscle tension and headaches. It is used in veterinary medicine in healing. Improves heart rate variability, which we actually want the variability, lowers our blood pressure. It's safe for pets. It's safe for premature babies. It There's a really interesting research where massage therapists were having all these kinds of health problems, and they took these massage therapists and they randomly assigned them. Half of them got nothing when they were out treating their patients, and the other half got to stand barefoot on an earthing mat while they were treating their patients. And interestingly, what this was doing is the massage therapists were getting the electrons and doing some electron transfer to their patients. If they had a fresh supply of electrons, they weren't getting depleted. However, if they were working on a patient who was electron depleted and they had available electrons, they were sharing their electrons with their patients, getting depleted themselves. So just some fascinating relationships to touch. And it helped them to be able to do their profession, stand on an earthing mat. There's all kinds of data to suggest it reduces inflammation and asthma, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, which is usually emphysema, and even research to show it helped to treat the cytokine storm, which is an inflammatory overreaction in people with COVID. Okay, so getting the Earth's nutrition, the electrons, the Earth is negatively charged. When we touch it, we secure those electrons. There's also a heartbeat in the Earth. We even know that people can fight jet lag when they fly to a different time zone if they touch the Earth soon in the new time zone. There's a little bit of like, flying, if you had the luxury of flying to the Caribbean and putting your feet in the sand, and how good that feels, how amazing that feels. There's even research to suggest it affects jet lag because it's the way you communicate and know where you are in the globe if you're touching the Earth in that part of the globe. So there's gravitational force that we all know about that keeps us standing on the ground instead of floating out in space. There's some magnetism that we are able to incur. So the Earth is an electromagnetic planet. We were evolved to touch the Earth on a regular basis, and we don't do that very often. This is a picture. I got my son's earthing mats a while back, and their kitty cats are indoor kitty cats. And they've got several indoor kitty cats, and they took a picture. They were making their bed and they had the earthing mat underneath their sheet, and the cat found the earthing mat. The cat wanted to go experience that being outside feeling and get those electrons. And I found this fascinating. And keep in mind, the mat's not heated. We all know cats are attracted to heat. That's why they like to hang out in our laps, because we're nice and warm. There's no heat. There's nothing else going on other than that mat is plugged into the mouth part of the electrical outlet into the grounding part. So it's getting electrons. So I thought that was kind of cute. Okay. Another TLC that I've invented now, number 10, rolling in the literature to the Walsh article and updating it. We know that part of the reason why we like to be outside and we like to feel sunshine, and you all know what I'm talking about when you've been up here in Boone and we've had like 5 gray days and it's been cold and the sun comes out and everybody gets out on the quad and everybody's like, worshiping the sun. You all know that feeling, but we know the science of it suggests we need to be exposed to red light and infrared light. We need to be exposed to that part of the spectrum. The infrared, we can't see with the naked eye. The red, we can if you've got a device that will show that red. What we think we appreciate so much in plants and being out in nature and feeling the greenery of the plants is what we're really seeing when we're seeing the green of the plants is we are seeing that infrared light coming from the sun reflecting off the plants into our eyes. And that feels really good. It's our way of like walking around in nature and being in the sunshine and getting those healthy rays of the sunshine, but then also getting all of that reflected off of the plants. So this makes sense why being in nature feels so good, why being in the sunshine feels so good. And again, we have artificial lives nowadays where we live inside so frequently. We live under artificial lights. We are getting artificial light from screens, and working on screens and being sedentary so much of the time. It makes a lot of sense that we've lost a lot of that fuel and that nutrition that we need coming from nature Because we used to spend all of our time outdoors or most of our time outdoors unless we were sleeping in a cave or whatnot. Okay. I do want to talk a little bit more about some of the science of the photobiomodulation or red light therapy because there's a lot out there that's showing this is used therapeutically. It's been used cosmetically in a lot of situations. This type of therapy, and then here's a dude standing in front of, he's got a panel that exudes red light and infrared light. And you can buy these things anywhere nowadays. Effective for treating depression and anxiety, effective for treating depression and enhancing cognitive functioning, particularly for individuals who are elderly. We know that this can be effective in treating pain and other neuropathic conditions. And we know red and infrared is beneficial, but there's even some research to show green light, which is in the full spectrum, can be especially helpful for fibromyalgia and migraine. And then sunlight exposure and health benefits, both in animal and human studies. And a shift in making vitamin D. I do want people to be careful and cautious. There are a lot of individuals that when we look at their blood work nowadays are having low vitamin D. Some of this is attributed to diet, some of this is attributed to other health conditions, and then some of it is because we don't spend enough outside time. So we're not making enough vitamin D from getting natural sunlight. And in some situations, we're outside, but we're wearing so much sunscreen because we don't want to get sunburn, which is a valid thing to be protecting against. The UVB light rays are not healthy for us. And so we know that this helps us produce vitamin D. We also know there's some nice research showing that this helps improve non-seasonal depression, but especially that seasonal depression where in the winter months we are not getting enough sunlight. I also want us to think about human evolution, and I want us to think about the color of people as they have evolved across the entire globe, which I think this is fascinating. We're the darker people. The darker people have evolved around the equator, all around the globe. And darker people do not need to absorb as much sunlight in their skin. That melatonin that makes the darker skin prevents some absorption of sunlight. And then if you think of where the lighter skinned and lighter colored individuals have evolved, they have evolved around the globe closer to the South Pole and the North Pole, or in between, but not right around the equator. And lighter skinned individuals, lighter eye color, lighter skin, lighter hair color, we tend to absorb more sunlight. We tend to get sunburned a little bit more easily too, so we've got to be careful of that because we've needed more absorption of sunlight because there's just plain less sunlight there, particularly in the winter months. And so isn't that kind of fascinating? Just the way we've evolved around the globe pays some homage to this. Okay, that is the end of all of the different parts of the intro lecture for Health Psych. And so I'm going to wrap this up today. I hope you have a wonderful day, and it is time now to move on to the other lectures. Take care, everybody.